103.2 Dublin City FM. This is Mental Wealth with Brian Green. Good afternoon. On today's programme, I'll be talking with Áine O'Mara from Headline about the work that they do with the media and suicide prevention. And I will also be talking with Terry Connolly and Mike Ross. They're having an event on the 23rd of November. It's a walk from the Spire in Dublin to Clontarf Castle for World Suicide Survivors Day, 23rd of November, being recognised and celebrated here in Ireland on the 23rd. Let's get to that right away. And I began by asking Terry Connolly to introduce Mike Ross and vice versa.
Thank you very much for putting me on the spot here. Well, Mike Ross is a former Leinster and Ireland rugby player. And he is leading the walk for us from the Spire to Clontarf Castle on the 23rd of November.
Mike, introduce Terry.
Well, Terry's actually a neighbour, and Terry, I think, heads up Friends of Suicide Loss here in Dublin, and he's organised the whole walk and the events surrounding it.
So you're leading the walk, you're like the Grand Marshal of the walk on the 23rd, are you?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, my wife tells me I should get a bit more out of the house, and this is a good occasion to do that.
The walk is the 23rd of November. It's in the afternoon. What time does it start at the Spire?
We start at the Spire at 1:30.
1:30, heading to Clontarf Castle, and whatever the weather, you're all heading there.
Yeah, we're going to go from the Spire down towards O'Connell Bridge. Then we're going to veer left down along the boardwalks, past the famous statues, and then we will pass then along Liberty Hall, up the North Strand. We'll pass the historical Five Lamps on the left, and then we'll veer over towards Fairview Park, and we'll walk through the park, and then we'll come out on to the seafront at Clontarf. We'll walk up along there, and then when we come to Castle Avenue, we go left, and we'll pass by Brian Boru's well on the right-hand side, and then we enter the castle.
The famous five lamps that are lighting blue for the 5 in a row. Tell us, so that if you're heading along to the castle, if you want to go on the walk, there's an event at the castle at the end of the walk and a dinner. Is it all connected, and can people, get involved and buy a ticket, and that funds Friends of Suicide Loss? Have I got that right?
Yes, that's right. So the walk itself is free. I mean, people can go on this walk, and we also then have events at the castle which are also free. Just before I go into that, after those events, then we do have music and a dinner later, which all cost €60. But prior to that, when we reach the castle, we will have readings, poetry readings, inspirational talks, speeches and so on. And we will then also have candle lighting. And it will be all very sort of, hyper emotional. And we will do other things depending on the weather. I don't want to say what we're doing because it depends on the weather. But we have some surprises in store for the people.
It's International Survivors of Suicide Day, or Survivors Day, November 23rd. And how many years has it been happening in Ireland?
Well, this last year was the first year it occurred when we introduced it. And this is our second year. It is in existence since 1999, and it originated in America.
How did they rope Mike Ross, the rugby player, into this event? How do they grab you? How do they nab you? Did they get onto your agent and settle a fee, or what's going on here?
No, I think it was actually through LinkedIn. Would you believe? Terry reached out to me because I did an article, was it last year, where I spoke about how I'd lost my brother to it. And he asked me if I'd get involved, and of course it's obviously a topic that would be close to my heart, so I agreed that I would contribute. And I think last year I contributed a few signed rugby balls, so we're kind of stepping up the involvement this year.
And is there anything that you're expecting to happen on the day that you're looking forward to? Is there anything particular?
Not really. I mean, hopefully be a nice walk, and people get a bit of help from it, and just think of what loved ones you've lost, and be in a supportive, caring environment that will, with other people who've gone through the same thing that you have.
And it's an international thing. This is happening in multiple countries?
Well, yes, it's happening in about, I think, 20 countries at the moment. But we're one of the first on this side of the world to do it. It's not happening in England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland as yet, but I would anticipate it will at some stage.
Survivors' Day is similar to other days in the calendar, but in particular it's for remembrance, is it? And for community and getting together around a theme?
Well, International Survivors of Suicide Loss Day is the one day in the year when people bereaved by suicide come together at various events around the world in their local communities to find comfort, support and understanding as they share stories of loss and hope. And the American Federation of Suicide Prevention oversees more than 370 events worldwide, which including ours here in Dublin. And while each event is different and and unique, we ourselves host, because due to cultural differences, but we hold our own unique event here in Dublin with the backing of the American Foundation. And ours is a little bit different in the sense that we also welcome and invite people who are bereaved from other losses to this event. And the reason for that is that we call that integration of grief, which we find is very important because we do this a few times in the year. And what we find with that is that our members then don't feel isolated or feel that they're victimized when they integrate with other people who are bereaved from other losses.
There's a tagline, mourning has broken, spelt MOURNING. Mourning and grief, you differentiate between mourning and grief?
Yes, there's a huge difference between mourning and grieving, and people sometimes don't understand that. Can I just maybe explain for us what grief is? Grief is a word we use to describe a highly complex mixture of feelings and thoughts after somebody loses somebody or a thing that they're attached to, and the grieving is a very personal thing, but it's internal. So if somebody is grieving, it would be internal thoughts and it would be internal feelings. Whereas mourning would be more external. It would be expressing their grief, and this would be through words and through actions and rituals. And that's the difference.
On the day in the castle, there will be a chat. I think it's myself and yourself, Mike, will be sparring on stage.
Hopefully not sparring, but yeah,
with the microphone.
With the microphone, yeah, there'll be no blue or white collar boxing here. Yeah, we'll be having a little interview, I believe.
And have any ground rules? Terry's probably going to set the ground rules for that conversation, or maybe we'll just set them here between the three of us. Nobody else is listening. But we're going to delve into you, your career, the past, and your involvement with Friends of Suicide Loss, and your story.
Yeah, proper. I think lots of people have stories to tell, and I don't think mine will be particularly different. But
people might have a particular interest in it coming from you, somebody who has, represented the nation on the rugby field. You've got a name, you've got an attraction for Friends of Suicide Loss. I know you might think your story is unique, and perhaps it is, but it's coming from you.
Yeah, look, that is true, and one of the reasons I kind of got involved in this is if it can make a difference to somebody, that's worth doing. And I don't think there's many families in Ireland that haven't been touched by suicide, and there's an enormous body of people out there who've experienced that loss and that mourning and that grief in their life. So, there are resources there, and Friends of Suicide Loss is one, and it's just important that people are aware that that's there for them.
To just change the subject ever so slightly, what was your opinion on the Rugby World Cup?
We talk about mourning and grief because I experienced those kind of emotions after it. Look, I think the one thing that that will hurt the lads coming home is that they didn't do themselves justice, for whatever reason. But that I know they prepared incredibly hard and they put a lot of training in, and they were in good form going into it. But sometimes things just don't come right for you in the day.
They had one of the best managers of the managers over there. Did they peak too soon?
You could say that. I mean, if you look back, 11, 10 months ago, Ireland were, I would say, the best team in the world. But at the top international level, all it takes is your performance levels come down a few percent, and that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I suppose we had a couple of games against Wales and suddenly we were on top of the table because they lost both in a row. You are an athlete and you are at peak fitness. Is mental not okay?
I retired 2 years ago.
In comparison to the other two members present, is mental health something that athletes find routine with their physical fitness to look after, or is it something that they struggle with like just as much as anybody else?
It depends on the individual. Like when I was playing rugby, you're taught mental coping skills because there's an enormous amount of pressure on you, especially at the top end. You have people scrutinising your every move, and there's no room. There's not much room for weakness. So you're taught some things you're taught are like control the controllables. So if you're going out to play a match, you can't control the referee, you can't control the weather, but you can control your preparation and how you prepare for it. So that is quite helpful in the real world. I mean, you can't really control some stuff in your job, but you can control what the work you do to prepare for it. So that's useful. Other things that give you benefit, exercise obviously is a good mood booster. It's proven it releases stress busting hormones within you, and you're certainly getting plenty of that. And I think when I retired, I missed that element of it. Started doing a bit again, but for a while I took a bit of time off, and that was probably a mistake on my behalf.
And is that movement from full time to retirement difficult transition to make?
It is a bit because it's something you've been doing for 10, 12, 15 years, as the case may be, and it's an enormous part of your identity, and there's no easy transition out of it. One day you're a rugby player, next day you're not, and unlike other, say if you're a soccer player, you have to go do something else, so you have to reinvent yourself, which can be quite challenging for a lot of guys. And I'm 2 years into that transition now, and I make no bones about it. It was tough going at the beginning, and I was one of the lucky ones who walked into a job afterwards.
On the day, there'll be many in attendance. You mentioned poetry. Will there be readings and perhaps maybe a song or two?
Oh yes, well the poetry will be from our own members, and they will be just reading something that's inspirational. But then later we have a musical evening. We'll have karaoke. We'll have a sit-down dinner. We have a troupe coming in from Belfast, entertaining us around 8:30. And we also have, he's regarded as one of the best bowling players in the world, Robbie Harris, coming along as well.
Brilliant. It almost sounds like the perfect place. Like Clontarf is a rugby community. The castle is a beautiful setting. It's very rich in its architecture, and it's very old and settled kind of place. And it seems like a lovely place. Is there a candlelit vigil like outside of on the outside, or is it indoors, or how's it happening?
No, that would be indoors. Yeah, but you're right though. The castle itself, there's something very grounding about it. And that's why we picked that place. And I don't know, I mean, it's Brian Boru's country, and a lot of people talk about Brian Boru and his inspiration that he beat the Vikings and all that. And he was able to fight against some foreign invaders or whatever, and that gives people inspirations, I think, So we're quite happy with the location and with the castle itself.
I last met you in June, Terry, and we had a great long chat post-vention. So something I was surprised to learn about, and probably that would be the theme of the particular interview. How's it been in your organisation over the last 5 months or so? Has it been busy? Has it been tough? Is there anything you'd like to report on?
It has been very busy indeed, and after I think that show we had with you, we got a lot of calls, and we're finding out that we've been, a lot of agencies there are recommending their clients to us because we do a specific work. We specialise in support groups. Now we do outreach support as well, and we also do one-to-one, but the support groups we specialise in, and there's a need for that in the community.
I believe a mutual contact was in touch with you, and you took part in a reggae sound system in the park at Stephen's Green.
That's right, yes. And thank you very much, Brian, for putting them on to us. Yeah, we went along to the park and, we gave out a few leaflets and we made a speech there, yeah.
I'm just thinking of Terry toasting to some reggae in Stephen's Green and, lots of kilowatts of audio.
Well, we got a lovely picture beside the Keela band.
Oh, very good. Yeah, there was a couple of Keela guys there. So let's put a sell on this, okay? What is it? When is it? And why should people go?
Well, the day itself, it will be a powerful day for people impacted by suicide, because anyone who participates in those events find connection with people in similar circumstances and experiences, and with that they find they're not alone. And it's also an opportunity for them to find hope and healing and peace in this shared experience. People who are bereaved by suicide, talking to other people similar to themselves in a safe environment can be instrumental in the healing process. And this event that we're doing is a great example of postvention in action, in a more wider sense, in a collective mode.
I'm going to use a terrible rugby pun, but it'd be kind of shoulder to shoulder with people in the same circumstances, walking from the Spire to Clontarf. Give us some detail, the date, the time, the gathering place.
Yeah, so it kicks off at 1:30 p.m. on Saturday the 23rd of November from the Spire.
Is pre-booking non-essential, and if you wanted to pre-book, where would you go?
Right, free booking is essential because there's a limit on the amount of people we can have at the dinner. And so to book, you can go online to Eventbrite and book there, or you can ring 01 492 7576.
On Eventbrite, I'm sure it's just Dublin and FOSL will be the search and you'll get it.
That's it.
Is it myself or is it somebody else from Dublin City FM interviewing Mike?
Well, Brian, I hope it's you.
What will we delve into? Where would you like to take the conversation?
Well, I think that the interview with Mike would be very inspirational for the people on the day, because if I remember correctly, Mike lost his brother to suicide in, I think, roughly around the late 1990s. And suicide was a crime up to 1993. And I know that Mike has a story or two to tell you to show how, about stigma at that time. And stigma was really strong in Ireland at that time because it was a crime. It's not as bad now, but it's still there. And so that should be very interesting. Also, after Mike experienced this awful tragedy in his family, he was able to go on and become an international rugby player, which is quite extraordinary. And I think that is really inspirational for people to hear. Because we have people in our group who are probably, out of their tragedy probably about 6 months or a year, and they see no hope for the future. And we are trying to give them hope in that day. And I think this is a great opportunity for this.
We'll definitely delve there, and maybe you've got some rugby stories to tell us too.
Yeah, PG of course, but when the camera mics go off, might be able to tell a bit more.
The live mics will go off and we'll hear it all at Clontarf Castle. November 23rd is the date for your diary, but it's coming upon us really soon, so maybe it's not a date for your diary, but it's a date for you to get onto Fosl.Ie and check out all these details and register through Eventbrite. I'm going to thank Terry Connolly and Mike Ross for speaking to me today and look forward to that walk. I will have to do it myself from the Spire, 1:30 on the Saturday the 23rd, out to Clontarf. Thank you very much for asking me to be involved in this.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
My thanks to Mike Ross and Terry Connolly. See you on the 23rd of November for World Suicide Survivors Day in Clontarf or at the Spire, and walk to Clontarf, Fosl.ie, Friends of Suicide Loss. And that's where you'll get all the details and links to Eventbrite. On the programme now, I turn my attention to the media and how the media covers suicide and other things mental health related. I got to speak to Áine O'Meara from Headline at the Crail Féile in Leixlip a couple of weeks ago, and she told me all about the work that Headline do.
Headline works with media and audiences to try and improve the responsible portrayal of suicide and mental ill health in Ireland.
So there is a degree of maybe bad practice. You identify this with research and then you go in and help media practitioners, newspapers, broadcasters and the audiences to understand the terms and the way to maybe deal with suicide as it turns up in community.
Yeah, well, this whole area is based on evidence around suicide reporting and its impact on audiences, particularly audiences who are at risk of suicide. So what we do is we speak to producers, both cross-platform, radio, television, newspapers and online, and we work with them in the language that they use and also how they frame stories around suicide and mental ill health. So the mental health aspect of it would cover stories around schizophrenia or psychosis or bipolar, and we also cover suicide and self-harm.
Are things getting better in this area? Are you making an impact?
Yeah, I believe so. The standard of reporting in Ireland, when you compare it internationally, is very high. It really is. In other countries, you could have a level of contagion from the media or a level of guideline adherence that is really quite poor. In Ireland, the standard is excellent. So our work is really to try and support the media doing what they're doing and make sure that they're doing what they need to do. And also if they need support in terms of they need an area researched or they need access to particular contributors, we can help them with that. So if they want to cover a story on, let's say, the lack of service provision or something like that in services to do with schizophrenia or things around that, or like youth self-harm, then we have partners who we work with and we essentially give them people who are media trained, who are capable of doing interviews, who know the guidelines. They know not to talk about suicide method on air, and that's essentially it.
You are, I'm going to wonder, are you like working like the fire brigade? Are you coming in when the situation is bad and the house is on fire, or do you kind of work with, talking to people during Mental Health Week and, across the calendar when there isn't, let's say, something spiking in the media? Are you there to kind of put people in the right direction, like go on radio stations like on this programme? Are you doing stuff like that?
Yeah, well, we do both, I suppose. Back in the day, Headline started in 2007. So back then it was probably more firefighting and it was probably more reactive. Right now we are essentially much more proactive in terms of working with the media and trying to address these issues in a time and a space when it's safe to do so and when there's actually space to consider these issues rather than when there's a live or critical incident and everything is very reactive. We're trying to get the training in place with journalists in newsrooms so that they already have the tools to cover this content, so they don't even need to call us when something happens. They instinctively know that this is how we cover it, this is how we support our audiences when we're talking about it, and also this is how we support our producers and presenters when we're covering it. You
mentioned connection with Shine, formerly Schizophrenia Ireland. You work out of their kind of offices, or are you separate to them?
Yeah, that's right. We work alongside the Shine support staff and also Sea Change support staff. So Sea Change is the National Stigma Reduction Campaign. So we all work out of the same hub.
A lot of people would know that, maybe the right term to use would be died by suicide in terms of not saying committed. Is this something that's going to change over a long period of time? It's kind of one of the kind of lower level kind of stigmatizing kind of language that people use in everyday life. It might not be intended in any kind of, malicious kind of way. Is that something that'll just have to work its way out of the system?
I think so. I think it's going to take time for that. I mean, language is a learned habit, and it is going to take time to unlearn it. That phrase in particular, committed suicide. Suicide hasn't been a crime in Ireland since 93. So it's going to take time for people to, I suppose, not associate it with crime. And some people who even use that phrase, committed suicide, they don't associate it with a crime. It's just that they've heard their parents say it or their grandparents or their peers. And I suppose the more people who drop that phrase and say died by suicide. I mean, it's a relatively small thing in the grand scheme of how you report on suicide, but generally we try and stay away from that phrase.
There is resources out there for people. There's a Safe Talk. It's a half-day training course.
Yeah, this is something that we would encourage producers and presenters to go on. It's a really excellent resource. It's funded by the National Office for Suicide Prevention. Again, Safe Talk is a half-day course. It's completely free. Anyone can access it if you go through your local health resource office, and it essentially gives you the tools to be able to ask somebody if they're feeling suicidal, and that might seem a really simple thing, but for a lot of people it's a very difficult thing to ask that question. And some people think that if I ask it, does that mean I'm putting the idea in their head? That's a myth that's been disproven a long time. So really the Safe Talk course is an excellent resource that anyone working in the community should access.
Is role play something that community radio stations could take kind of could they experience kind of some role play in advance of a live situation to see how they would handle things?
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and if we had the resources to do that, we would be running role plays. It's a really good idea, and it's something that I think that would help producers and presenters handle live situations. For instance, if you have somebody who happens to come on air and they express thoughts of suicide, how does a presenter handle that? How does a producer handle that? Role play is something that could essentially work through those different scenarios before you're ever faced with it in a live situation where you have audiences tuned in and you want to, as much as possible, minimise the harm that's coming to that audience.
Final question, it might be a little bit outside your area, but as you work with the National Office of Suicide Prevention, is the numbers coming down in that area?
I believe they are. I believe there's an awful lot more work to do, though. An awful lot more work to do. The mental health service provision in this country is... will I say under attack? Yes, it probably is. There's just nowhere near enough funding for supports for frontline staff. There's not enough staff. There are areas of this country that don't have any child psychology services, and in this day and age, that's an outrage. And of course, media want to cover that, and they should cover it. It's what we do is about covering that in a responsible way.
When media cover these topics at the end of the interview or piece, they are encouraged to shout out some phone numbers. So I'm going to shout out one phone number, you'll shout out another, and we'll end the interview. Pieta House, 1800 247 247.
Samaritans is 116 123.
Áine O'Meara from Headline, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
My thanks to Áine and Headline. Also to Terry Connolly and Mike Ross, Friends of Suicide Loss. That date, November 23rd, for your diaries. We're back next Tuesday at the same time, same place, 103.2 Dublin City FM. Until then, have a great week. Stay safe, take care, and goodbye.